Greetings and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. I'm State Representative Mike Mrowicki, and this is going to be the last show of this year, 2016. We are heading into the new year and the new legislative session, getting ready for that in short order. Today's guest is my district mate and the Dean of the Vermont House, David Deen. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
You bet. David, you have been as strong an advocate for the environment, as strong an advocate for clean water as I've seen in all my years in public service, and it's an honor to be able to work with you and to see the work you do year-round, both with the Connecticut River Watershed Council and in the legislature. We're heading back in a few weeks. You got some landmark legislation passed that you've been working on for 10 years or more. Mm-hmm. What's the next steps? Or give us a little review of what was passed and what are the next steps for that?
Well, the Vermont Clean Water Act passed in 2015, and it was the results of a lot of work by a lot of people and led by the Secretary of the Agency of Agriculture, the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources, my committee, and Commissioner David Mears, who was, at the time of the passage of the bill, the Commissioner for the Department of Environmental Conservation. They were all appointed by Governor Shumlin, and they and the governor were partners throughout the work that we did to develop the Clean Water Act. Clean Water Act addresses the single largest remaining problem with clean water in the United States and in the state of Vermont, and that's what's called non-point source pollution. We've pretty much cleaned up the pipes of sewage and industrial waste and anything that is a discrete discharge into the waters of the United States are no longer permitted without a permit that controls the level of what is going into the water. Non-point source pollution is overland runoff. It's you get a heavy rain, water starts moving down the land, starts moving down the roadways. It takes any and everything with it. And you are unsure of what the levels of pollutants might be or the levels of nutrients. And that brings up the Clean Water Act because Lake Champlain is impaired for overloading of phosphorus. And that's a nutrient, and what it does is it sets off very intense plant growth, aquatic plants, and what I think most people now are familiar with the phrase, blue-green algae blooms that are damaging to the water, smell bad, kill fish, will make pets and people sick if you get into the wrong cyanobacteria bloom of algae. And the Connecticut River has a similar problem for a different nutrient, nitrogen. The Connecticut River flows into Long Island Sound. Long Island Sound, just as does at the mouth of the Mississippi, Long Island Sound has a dead zone. And it's because there's too much nitrogen in that runoff that gets into our rivers. So the bill, we had a rubric that we used every chance we got, all in. All sectors, agriculture, municipalities, developers, the Vermont Department of Transportation. You know, all of the people that create impervious surfaces where water cannot be absorbed by the ground and where the microbes can't work on the pollutants, the toxins, and the nutrients. Everybody has increased responsibilities. Agriculture does. I know that some voices within the agriculture community are saying, oh, you're putting it all on us. Well, that's not true. And Municipalities are facing a new permitting scheme and are now responsible for dealing with the runoff from roads, particularly dirt roads. Everybody loves dirt roads, but if they are not ditched properly and if the runoff that comes off of those roads is not handled properly, right into a stream or river, taking everything with it. So it goes across all sectors. Logging operations are included. There's a new set of standards for logging. There's a new set of standards for agriculture. There's a new set of standards for roadways. And people are coming into the timelines that are triggering compliance with those new rules, which leads me to the main agenda item in front of my committee this year. As part of that legislation, we did not want to simply impose additional costs. We wanted to have people who are responsible for creating runoff, and that's all of us. We are all part of this problem. Underwrite some of these costs in these different sectors. And we did it through creating a clean water fund that for the last 2 years, 2 budget cycles, has been fueled by a 0.2%, that's 0.2% increase in the property transfer tax. And that money has been made available to help farmers, to help municipalities, to, in some cases, even help developers, particularly those that built their places, there were no standards, there were no permits, and now they're having to do additional work. But that funding source sunsets, which means it comes to an end. Legislative language for it ends June 30th, 2018. Because we build a budget a year ahead, we need to replace that funding source with a permanent and the word that the treasurer is using is a nexus, a source of funds that has a nexus to clean water. And so we asked Beth Pierce, our treasurer, to come back to us in January of 2017, right after we get back into session this year, with some recommendations of how she would fuel this clean water fund. And she's been working with agriculture, with environmental conservation, the League of Cities and Towns, the logging interest, and of course with her knowledge of financial structure and whatever, we feel that the study is in good hands. We are waiting for some word to leak out. So far, there's no hint of what might be coming up as a recommendation from her. But we also gave her support through the tax department in terms of being able to structure a program. So that's going to be top of the agenda. It is a money raising and money spending piece of legislation. So the primary committees of jurisdiction will be Ways and Means and Appropriations. But it is a fund and a mechanism and an idea that was all part of the Clean Water Bill. So we'll get to vet the ideas that come to us from the treasurer. So long answer to your question,
no,
but
it's a big
bill.
It's a big bill. Just about every year we head into the legislative session with an agenda of things that have been rising up onto the front burner, and then usually at least one or more things comes up that we hadn't anticipated. And I don't know that many people anticipated what happened in Bennington County in the last year with the
PFOA, polluted groundwater.
Chemical pollution from a factory that had closed down, right?
Yes.
Do you have a sense of whether there's more of that on the horizon for Vermont, or does this fall within the jurisdiction of the bill that you've put together?
Not specifically, but in fact, it is the Water Resources Committee that deals with groundwater and protection of groundwater issues. there is Vermont being responsible to our citizens directly ourselves, and then there's a federal overlay. And the Toxic Substance Control Act passed the U.S. Congress last year. It preempts state control of toxins that are on the EPA list. There are some remaining powers that the state has. We don't quite know all of what is in that federal bill. So that's going to be the first test for us, is to get to understand that Toxic Control Act. And then to review, and I know your committee has been involved with toxins. I know that our committees, both Human Services and the Water Resources Committee, were involved with setting up a registry at the Commissioner of Health's website of toxic substances in children products. And at this point, I can't give you the definitive answer about whether or not that stays in place, given what has passed at the federal level.
Yeah. We're going to be working with the new administration, both in Montpelier and in Washington. And as some of the appointments from Washington start to be made known, some of us are aghast, to say the least, that people are being put in charge of departments and agencies that in the past they have vowed to dismantle. In one case, we have someone in charge of the Department of Energy who, while he couldn't remember the name of the department, he was certainly remembering that he wanted to do away with it. We have people in charge of other agencies who are climate deniers. And contrast that, though, we just had news of the appointment of the Agency of Natural Resources. And I, like many people, were rather pleased with Governor-elect Scott's appointment there. And could you tell us a little bit about the person that you've worked with before and what you hope?
Yeah, Julie Moore is someone who was a major contributor to the Clean Water Act that we just talked about. She worked in the Douglas administration in the Agency of Natural Resources, was their director of what then was known as Clean and Clear, which is now called Ecosystem Restoration. But the name doesn't matter, it has the same function. And she had some very good ideas in terms of how to address some of the intractable tensions that you run into whenever you handle a piece of major legislation. She has been working for Stone Environmental, which is a consultant company. And her latest assignment that I've been involved with her with is she has been facilitating meetings and resolution of concerns, environmental concerns around the impact of Cabot operations up in central Vermont, north central Vermont. And by stakeholders, I mean the Lake Champlain International Committee, the Connecticut River Watershed Council, Vermont Natural Resources Council. We were all concerned about their discharge permit and what its impact in terms of those nutrients that we were talking about. A lot of nitrogen and a lot of phosphorus in those wastes that are land applied. So we wanted to work with Cabot. Cabot decided they were going to work with us. And we have basically reached an accord. The environmental interests are being met in terms of what's on the table for resolution right now. And Cabot feels that as a business, they can continue to be profitable. And so it's, again, one of those win-win situations that you work out. But it was Julie's strong leadership pushing all of us to come to some level of accord through the process that got us to the resolution. So I've had positive experiences with Julie, and I'm pleased.
So she has a scientific background in this field.
Yes, I believe she's an engineer and has, does consultant work or did consultant work. I'm sure she'll be leaving Stone Environmental. You get in time for nothing else once you're the secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources.
Now, in regard to this situation with the Cabot Cooperative, there was money on the table, money needed to do this, and Cabot stepped up, didn't they?
Yeah, the additional expenses to Cabot in the range of $5 million over a period of time. I mean, they didn't walk in with a brown bag full of $100 bills, but they have made the commitment to redesign the systems so that they create less waste, to be able to reuse some of what is now considered waste, so that they're not putting it out there into the environment, and restructure their manufacturing process. As I said, total cost might be as much as $5 million, and we've reached accord. Our needs as the Watershed Council so that no additional nitrogen is added to the river or to the river system as it's flowing to Long Island Sound were met. And, and so what I've been doing since we've gotten through all of this is whenever I get a chance, I tell people, buy Cabot.
Well, hopefully we're already doing that.
Yeah.
But as a great example of someone being a good neighbor and a good steward to the environment, as well as realizing it makes good business.
Yeah, and Julie, making sure that everybody played fair, did their homework, was ready to participate. She set a pretty good standard and a pretty good pace in terms of everybody's busy life to try and get this worked out.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. We do have a new governor coming in, but I want to take a minute also to thank the outgoing governor. Whether it's in your field or right across the board, we have a lot to be grateful for. And the bill that you're just talking about might not have gotten off the ground with other administrations. And
Clean Water Act of Vermont does not pass without the active leadership from the governor's office in terms of the administration secretaries and commissioners that make things happen. And it simply doesn't happen if the governor's not there.
Yep, and certainly Peter Shumlin was there on this and many other issues too. So we are grateful for him, and there's one other area where he will be missed. So we want to thank the governor for his stewardship of the environment and working under that banner of environmental justice, the way many of us are called to act. You've got some other bills that you're going to be proposing this year. Anything you want to share with us?
Yeah, there are a few issues that are left out there. In working with the Watershed Council, we do a great deal of work with landowners who have erosion problems, and they're happy to work with us because it's protecting their land, and excessive erosion harms rivers. Well, FEMA came up with a new wrinkle that was just dropped on us in the last couple of months. And those plantings of native NRCS approved plants, native plants in a buffer zone in order to stop erosion is development as far as FEMA is concerned. And because it's development and because it's in a floodplain, they have to have a permit.
Well, that slows the process down.
That slows the process right down. And what's what really makes it difficult, these projects are done by high school kids. They're done by nonprofit organizations that are entirely volunteer. And, yeah, we get some help from NRCS. They help us buy the plants and whatever. But, the local chapter of Trout Unlimited gets out there and towns people and other landowners. So we have this all volunteer based effort around the state to address erosion in the interest of rivers and landowners. And FEMA's now telling us that they all got to be permitted. So we're working. In fact, I spent a half hour with a draftsperson from Legislative Council trying to figure out exactly how we're going to address that. As part of the Clean Water Act, we of course are asking farmers to become part of the solution by establishing buffer zones. Now, a buffer zone that goes from a planting that develops a crop that they can use to feed animals or whatever into a static buffer area costs them money. That's a real cost to the farmer. And there are programs at the federal and state level that will reimburse them, sort of rent that area of land so that it can go back into being a protective buffer for the water. Well, we have a cap that we put in legislation 20 years ago. And with what's happened with land prices, what's happened with the value of corn or hay or other commodities that come off of that land, we've got to lift that limit. So it's a small little piece of legislation. It's not, but it is a key that unlocks other provisions within the Clean Water Act. So this is not going to be a year of major legislation, but we're going to try and straighten out things with the Clean Water Act and things with dam safety and other water-related issues.
There was a bill that took up a lot of time in your committee, eventually passed, got sent over to the Senate in regards to ivory. It didn't pass the Senate, as I understand it, but have you been hearing from people around this bill, and do you think it'll see the light of day again in the legislature?
We have been hearing from people. Yeah, that was a real disappointment. I mean, there were monster issues on the table, but to know that we could have taken a step to stop the illegal trade of elephant ivory and helped preserve that species on the face of the earth was disappointing that it didn't pass. But yeah, it will come back, and we will have further discussions on it.
And this was a bill that started out as a bipartisan bill in the House, didn't it?
Yeah, one of the lead sponsors is certainly one of the leaders in the Republican caucus, both in the House and in the city of Burlington. The man is, a moderate Republican, but certainly part of the leadership.
I know we sometimes complain in the House that we've sent bills over to the Senate and they didn't go anywhere. Is there anything the Senate sent over to us that didn't get completed?
No. There wasn't a whole lot in the water resources or fish and wildlife world. We had our usual omnibus bill cleaning up the fish and wildlife statutes that sometimes go back hundreds of years, and they're still on the books. There are provisions in law that are still on the books. No, everything that came across from the Senate, we dealt with one way or the other. There's nothing that did not pass that came to us from the Senate in my realm, where I'm engaged.
Now, as we look ahead to the two-year session ahead of us, and we like to say that the Vermont part-time legislature crams 1 year of work into 2 years, but it's part of being a citizens legislature. As you look ahead, are there other concerns that you have that outside the realm of your committee that you hope we take up?
Well, I think we will review Act 46, which is the education consolidation bill. I know that there is interest in our district, as well as our county, as well as the state, that one size may not fit all. And maybe we need to build some more flexibility into it. Healthcare, I don't expect to see a great deal happen with healthcare. It's tremendously expensive, and we've already got some problems relative to not a deficit. Vermont legislature does not create deficit situations, but we have a gap in projected revenue over projected expenses into next year already. So it would be very difficult to take something like that up this year.
Sure. But by the end of the session, when we leave a balanced budget. So
we leave with a balanced budget.
How do people get in touch with you if they want to talk about a bill, if they have an issue? Is email the best way?
Yes, email, because as you are completely aware, you don't know what your schedule is until you get there in the morning and you have some idea when, and this is true for both of us, we have real life jobs other than our legislative responsibilities, so that on those days that we're not in session, those are the days when everybody sets up meetings. And so I'm on the road. I answer emails. I stay in touch with people, as you do. You're actually better at it than I am in terms of being responsive. But email is the best way. My email address is strictlytrout@vermontl.net, or you can get either Mike or I at the legislative address.
Or our website.
Yeah, or the website. ddeen@leg.state.vt.us. And those emails, I have them forwarded to my home address. And so, everybody's address is the same at the legislature.
And as you said, the legislative website has that information. Or David and I share the district, and we share a website. It's Windham 4. That's Windham, the number 4.net. Our contact information is on there, and we want to hear from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
In closing, I just wanted to say a few words as we close out the year. We have gone from a year of campaigning to where it's time to govern. Those of us who were fortunate enough to be elected are moving up to Montpelier for the session to govern. Someone who works in human services and outside the legislature works on human services, this is going to be another challenging year. We're still facing the ongoing challenge of the opioid crisis, the epidemic of both illegal and legal use of these drugs. That impacts so many other areas. It impacts child protection, impacts foster care systems that work hand in hand with child protection. And all that circles around to mental health addiction treatments. And it's a system that continues to struggle. It struggles from a lack of resources, and that's best exemplified by the people waiting to get into treatment and other people waiting to get into a mental health bed, and in some cases having to do that waiting in a hospital emergency room. The rest of the human services landscape is also impacted because there's other needs, from early care and education to elder care and disability services. And all the while, I get it that Vermonters are struggling. Vermonters are trying to keep their heads above water, working hard, want to breathe a little easier. And that's why I support a comprehensive tax reform that lowers property taxes and sales taxes and shifts revenues to sources that are more akin to the 21st century that we're living in now. Before I go, I'd be remiss not to thank the outgoing governor, Peter Shumlin. especially for what he's done in this county and in the town here of Brattleboro. If you look at what's happened downtown here, a lot of that wouldn't have happened without Governor Shumlin. If you look at the burgeoning green economy that Windham County is leading the state in, a lot of that has to do with Governor Shumlin. If you have broadband now and you didn't, it's probably because of Governor Shumlin. And if you have access to health care and you didn't before, Governor Shumlin had a lot to do with that. We continue to have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country and one of the lowest rates of people who don't have insurance. And Governor Shumlin's done some great work on that. I look forward to working with the new governor coming in and how we can best serve Vermonters, because when it comes down to it, we are Vermonters first and last, and whatever party we belong to takes a back seat to that. We are Vermonters first and last. I've heard from a lot of people who are still disappointed at the outcome of the election, and I'm one of them. I certainly wished it could have gone another way, but I think from the example of Senator Sanders, it's our job now to keep that work going, to continue to work on the concerns, the issues fueled by the values, the idea that we're all working under the banners of justice, whether it's social and racial justice, economic justice, or environmental justice. And Senator Sanders has, again, provided some great leadership, and his campaign has evolved into ourrevolution.com. And I advise you to go take a look at that if you haven't, if you want to get energized and figure out what to do next. There are lots of ways to be active and help, whether it's clean water group like the Connecticut River Watershed Council or working with Curtis Reed and the Vermont Partnership. There are lots of ways to help make America and Vermont a better place to live. We've got some hard times ahead, but we've seen hard times, and it's time to get to work. So on that note, I wish you all a healthy holiday, a joyous new year, and better times ahead for all of us. Thanks to you for watching, and thanks again to all the people at BCTV for bringing our work to you. Bye-bye now.